Fairbanks Focus Alaska View is brought to you by the University of Alaska Fairbanks, Alaska's first university, and the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation, bringing economic development to interior Alaska.
Thanks for joining us on Fairbanks Focus Alaska View. I'm Nanette, and today I'm joined by Nadine and Jomo. And Nadine, tell us about your role here in Fairbanks.
And today's my last day. I've been on the Borough Assembly for the last 7 years, and recently working a little bit on the energy issue.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. And Jomo, I know you work for the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation. Tell us what you do there.
I do. I'm the energy project manager for FEDC.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. And we've been talking about energy all this month, and we've been talking a lot with Jim Dodson about the different initiatives that are coming up. Mm-hmm. What kind of projects are we working on, and things that are happening in Fairbanks that the community should know about regarding energy?
Well, I think too, sort of taking a little bit of a step back is that, I mean, obviously the general lament is energy costs are killing our community, and so but I think recently what happened is that there was a new municipal utility that was created that required the City of Fairbanks, the City of North Pole, and the Borough Assembly approval. That entity has been created, and I think it can do a number of different things. It can either facilitate a solution or actually provide services if necessary, and the goal being that it's the safety net to make sure that the space heat needs of the community are met. So for instance, if Golden Valley works on its rates and Flint Hills works on lowering the cost of its product, we want to make sure that someone's there to take care of the residents and the businesses in the community. And so I think creating that utility changed the dynamics a little bit. Recently the governor was in town. He's long said that he wants us to kind of as a community get together about a solution. I'm not so sure that we're there yet, but I think that the discussions have been very, very good, and that there's a willingness of everyone, it seems a willingness of people to get together and trying to reach some sort of a consensus solution.
Awesome. Well, I know that Governor Pronoun talked with our mayors here in Fairbanks, all three of them, and met with a whole bunch of people regarding energy, and that people were pretty excited about him being here. So I think it's a step in the right direction, of course. And the article in the Fairbanks Newsminer talked a lot about how if we can establish good energy policy here in Fairbanks, that will help us establish better energy policy throughout the state. And Jomo, what kind of projects are we working on here in Alaska? I know that you've been part of the energy initiative too, and really are pushing towards a more goal-focused path towards that. What can you tell us about that?
Okay, let's back up and go very high level. At the highest of high level, probably the biggest success right now regarding the community and this energy utility are two things. And the first of all is participation. Finally, a willingness on the part of the community to actively participate in its own advancement. And that's really what the utility is all about. For a long time, we have been passive, both on a municipal level and on the state level, passive regarding our energy future and how it is built and makes itself manifest. So the utility is a means of participation, and I think that's a very valuable and important step. The second thing is, as a function of that participation, a willingness or to consider investment in ourselves. The utility is a means and a mechanism, to facilitate participation, but also facilitate investment. And on a state level, we've been doing that tentatively now for several years. On a state level, energy projects, large-scale energy projects include consideration of and pursuit of a large diameter gas line to move North Slope gas down to the coast or somewhere where it can be monetized. But also the Susitna Dam project, large-scale hydro project, wind farms, small diameter gas lines. The commonality for all of those projects are the recognition that if the state wants them to come to fruition and wants them to come to fruition in a way that provides maximum or at least more benefits to the citizens of Alaska, then the state should participate and will probably have to participate in all of those projects all of them, and all of those project sponsors are going to the state looking for that assistance. This utility is no different. But a willingness to actively engage, and the recognition that we need to invest in ourselves, set a goal, and actively pursue those goals is refreshing. And it is it's high time that we've done it.
Well, and I think that Governor Parnell's, input being here even in Fairbanks speaks highly to the pursuit of those goals and the recognition that it's time. So, so yeah, it's a pretty exciting time for energy, I think, here in Fairbanks. Do you know if there's any other backing, the people that are looking at this, like the AARP or anything like that? And the reason why I ask, I know it's kind of a strange question, energy has affected us on a personal level. My grandparents sold their home and moved away from Fairbanks a few years ago. They've recently moved back. They're living at Ravens Landing, and they love it there. But their main reason for leaving Alaska initially was they could no longer afford to heat their home. And I don't know if other entities like, say, AARP, which is the 55 and over group, are participating or actively seeking a voice, or if anyone's even looking at that.
I would say, in general terms, yes, not a specific group, but I will say this is that I think what's motivating people is this very keen awareness that is a problem. And I think that, in the course of going through that creating that utility, we had to get a vote from the North Pole City Council and the Fairbanks City Council and the Borough Assembly is that and there, in each of those entities, I think there was 4 meetings. It was very high profile, high discussion item, and there was a lot of resistance at first, but I really believe at the end of the day, through those multiple public processes, that's what motivated people to support it, is that we have to do something. I mean, to do nothing is almost criminal at this point. So not specific groups, but definitely I think everyone is, from the governor on down to the councils, is just very, very, very aware that we have to do something.
And I think, of course, the citizens have been aware for a long time.
Yes.
Fairbanks of the needs.
Yeah.
But how would they, do you guys have any suggestions on how to be more active, more proactive for us as citizens who are, also energy consumers?
I would say that I think what the hope is that, the governor came and met with a lot of people, and that he's talking to his agency people, and that they come up with a solution that they're comfortable with, and assuming the community is comfortable with it. Really, it's going to then become, because I assume we're talking about capital, either capital or loan guarantees, and so once it reaches that state level, then it would be critically important for people to support it through contacting their legislators and the governor once it makes it into the capital budget or a piece of legislation. That would be very, very critical, because that's where the next level is going to come. And then, once the utility is up and running, then there's another avenue for people to voice either concerns or support or hopes and dreams, I guess.
And I read in the article in the Newswire too about the Lowell Group. Do either of you know who the Lowell Group is, or what constitutes that group?
Technically, I'm a member.
Okay.
I think I think the rules are if you go to more than 5 meetings, you're co-opted, and I have. But they're another citizen group. One of the things, or one of the gaps in any community is that you have a lot of people doing a lot of things, but you don't always know everybody who's doing things and what they're doing. The Lowell Group is a group of concerned citizens that are actively engaged in watching the energy issue and have been working on a plan for how, again, we might move the community forward. But also not just the community, but the community, our community in the milieu of the state at large. Another group that's the same is at the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation. We host the Interiors Issues Council. They have an Energy for All Alaska group, and they actually have, it used to be the Cost of Energy group, but the recognition that Fairbanks fits within a larger state context, and that the things that we do to try to help Fairbanks should also, as much as possible, dovetail and advance forward the state as a whole, is now built into the name, and that's part of the focus. The Chamber of Fairbanks Chamber of Commerce has an energy group. So the Lowell Group is one of those citizen groups actively engaged in and watching and trying to advance the energy issue in the community. They have a little different perspective than, say, the Interior Issues Council Energy for All Alaska group or the Chamber Energy group, but there's lots of commonalities as well. And really, I think the key for our own success as a community and the key for our success as a state as a whole is trying to build on our commonalities, mitigate the things that divide us, but build on the things that unite us, because we are all going to rise and fall together.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, and I'm glad that I asked that question with you here, Jim. I didn't realize you were part of the little group, so that's wonderful to have an expert here. So
I am not an expert, but I am a listener. I'm a listener.
Awesome. And what else can you guys tell us about where we go from here with the energy movement? I know that we've kind of talked about that already a little bit, but
I think in two things. Most of the focus recently in the discussion has been that there is general agreement that trucking gas from the North Slope is the short-term solution for Fairbanks, and that's what we're focusing on. It was really good news to hear that GVA has a contract with BP for the supply side. But so the other thing, and then longer term, the bullet line comes through or a large diameter pipeline comes through, whatever. But I think what's really, from my view, so we get gas here. Well, if we don't have a distribution system that gets it to people's homes and businesses, then it's sort of a moot point. And so my hope is that that's what that part of this overall discussion is. We have to have supply, but that we start building that distribution system out as quickly as possible, or else it's not going to, we'll have gas and nobody will be able to use it. And so that's my hope. And I know from, for instance, like Dan Fauske, he's been pushing the bullet line. He's always said for a long time that that's what Fairbanks should be doing, is building out their distribution system. So that's kind of my hope, in that the Assembly last night passed a resolution and for our legislative priorities, and there was generic support for funding for an LNG plant on the North Slope, and also specifically money for the new utility to start doing the right-of-way activities, the permitting, environmental and detailed construction and engineering for the phase 1 of this distribution system, so that we start doing that work. It's kind of tedious, it's a little spendy, but if we start building that distribution system out, we can multitask. We can do 2 parallel lines, work on getting it down here, but that when we do get it here, people can actually have access to the gas. So to me, that I think is a pretty critical next step.
So it sounds like you're focusing on those goals already at those Assembly meetings.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. And Jim, is there anything else that you'd like to add to what you took home from the Assembly meetings?
Only that I'm encouraged. This is actually my second tour at the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation. And before, I was the energy project manager, as well as the business development and technology transfer project manager. And I used to say those years ago that one of the encouraging things about Fairbanks was that all the tools were in the toolbox. We need to start using them. But we do have, as a community, all the tools in the toolbox. And we have another tool in our toolbox now. What is most encouraging for me is that we are beginning to use them to build the future that we all want to see.
And what are some of those tools, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure. We have enormous intellectual capital between the university, our utility sector. Specifically regarding this utility, again, we have a top-flight university on the Hill. We have a dynamic utility sector, and one that is willing to engage with the public. We have very active citizenry and a lot of just very, very smart people. We have a fairly strong economic and infrastructural base to build on. Those tools are there, and we have a dynamic people that want to build that brighter future, and that is the most critical component. And those things are there. We've always had them, but again, little by little, we've begun to harness those resources for ourselves. I think we're going to get there. Certainly, I'm very encouraged that we're on the path to.
Well, I know that some of the goals that we're looking at they're hoping to have it all, some of it at least, worked out by 2016 for some of the initiatives and things that I've heard too. So it's a very exciting time for energy in Fairbanks, for sure. But I think that you're right. I think the biggest asset are the people in our community. There's no doubt. And so for me, it's always like, well, how can we be involved? And so it's good to know things about like the little group. It's good to always be reminding people, call your legislatures, write those letters to the editor, and be involved and be active, and listen to the assembly meetings on the radio if you can't make it in, so we know what's going on.
And we are the kind of state and community where you as the individual can be impactful. I'm from Virginia, 20 million people.
Yeah.
Here in Fairbanks, Alaska, here in the state of Alaska, I know that this is the election season and people sometimes feel jaded. But as an individual, I've never been in a place where the individual could be more impactful than they are right here. And I really do encourage people to vote, to speak, because your voice does have meaning. It always did, but it really can make an impact.
Well, and I know you know that as an assemblywoman, how important being involved in the community is.
Well, it is. I mean, and Joan was right. It's very easy. Some years ago, someone said, "Well, we don't have any professional sports, in the state, so politics is our spectator sport." And I think it's true. I mean, it's on a way more personal level here, and you can, and it matters that you communicate with people about what it is that you want. And so yeah, I think there's more of that opportunity here, and it's easier too. I mean, there's good access with just about everybody, I think.
Well, and I think our politicians here listen a little bit more because they realize that it's much more about the people who you're serving. I think here in Alaska, and I think we bond a lot more together because of the trials that we face being Alaskans.
Yes.
But yeah, I really appreciate you guys coming in today. Thanks for joining us on Fairbanks Focus Alaska View. I'm Nanette Pearson, and I'd like to thank our guests Nadine Winters and Jomo Stewart.
I'm Samantha Larson, and today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Mr. Jerry Johnson, research professor at UAF, as well as director of Alaska Hydrokinetic Energy Research Centers. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Johnson.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. If you will, tell me a little bit about your position at UAF.
Well, I work, as you mentioned, as a research professor at the Institute of Northern Engineering, which is the research arm of the College of Engineering and Mines. And in that capacity, I do research on a number of different projects related to space sciences, renewable energy, and snow and frozen ground. And for the interview here, I'm acting as the director for the Alaska Hydrokinetic Energy Research Center.
Okay. I was doing a little research online about the Hydrokinetic Research Center, but if you will, can you explain just a small synopsis for our viewers of what that entails?
Hydrokinetic energy is essentially placing electric generation turbines in the currents of tides and rivers. And it's a fairly new area of energy that is probably at the same or similar stage as wind energy was 15 or 20 years ago. So there are a lot of ideas and a lot of new technologies coming on board that are primarily being developed by private industry with support of government agencies to do that. And the particular interest area that we have is how the river environment affects the operation of these devices, and also how the devices impact the river environments. For example, the fish, does it change the sediment flow? Does it change the current flow within it? And in recent years, there's been a couple of demonstrations of these devices in Alaska and Canada, and what they've found is the biggest impediment for operating so far has been woody debris that flows down the rivers and either accumulates on the devices or impacts the generating part of the device to damage it or plug it up. And most of the debris is on the surface, but you also get debris that flows essentially anywhere in the river channel. And in fact, in some places you can have woody debris that floats in a vertical orientation where the bottom is scraping along the bottom of the river, so it basically sweeps the whole river cross-section.
Interesting. Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just trying to get a basic understanding for this hydrokinetic project, if you will. There's inland communities along, the river, these water sources that these people have energy, but it's an extreme cost. So basically, this hydrokinetic approach will give them a more cost-effective, more energy-efficient energy source, if you will.
That is the hope. The hope is that you can put a hydrokinetic device next to a village and get the local community members actually running it, maintaining it. So you're producing energy completely locally and running it through a local utility as well, as compared to having to bring in diesel oil, because most of the energy in villages now is operated by diesel power. And Alaska is in a unique situation in that the majority of hydrokinetic energy in the U.S. resides in Alaska, in their rivers and in the tides. And we're talking primarily about hydrokinetic energy in rivers, but there's a large effort to harness the tidal energies in Cook Inlet.
Okay. So I'm a little curious as far as the cost will go for this. Say that in the future, this hydrokinetic approach does work and it is better and more cost effective than the diesel source they're using now in these villages and communities. Where will the funding go? I mean, the money that they're paying now for diesel, when it's switched over to this hydrokinetic source, where will that money go? Is it going to be significantly cheaper for them?
At this stage, I'd have to say no one really knows. Okay. As most people understand, most renewable energies aren't cost effective compared to like coal-fired plants that can produce energy much cheaper. Even the Eva Creek wind farm had government subsidy to be built. So the idea is that you have to get through these initial startup hurdles, because there's a classic curve when you're doing new technology where there's a sudden increase in enthusiasm, and then they start seeing where the costs and problems are, and then it kind of crashes.
No.
And then as people start solving those problems, you come back up to a more reasonable basis. And I would say pretty much all new energy and new technology goes through that to some degree. And in the case of hydrokinetic energy, there were some early studies done by EPRI to look at the cost of hydrokinetic energy, and these were all paper studies. And in those studies, the energy that people pay in the villages could be comparable to hydrokinetic costs. And I won't really give figures because those change all the time.